Namaste and welcome to this exciting new episode of Sattology debunking mythology. Sat in Sanskrit means truth. It's the opposite of myth in Sanskrit. Ma, choti e ki matra and tha, myth. Sattology, उसमें लोगों से add किया तो it becomes a science of truth, a study of truth. And mythology means a science of fake lie, imagination or untruth. Today we have a very, very special topic, and everybody asks evidences. If every country, they ask for evidences in the law offices, you'll want evidence, but we have not defined evidence. What is the evidence? Praman from the Shastra. In the Sanskrit word is praman. And also we will talk about some more areas where we can build strength in the yogis and the spiritual practitioners all over the world. I have a very, very special guest, a Rishi, Muni, researcher. And if I forget any adjective, but I can attach all the adjectives, because it's a real honor to meet with someone who does original work. We can take inspiration from everyone else. That's called Smriti. Shruti, Smriti, Purana, Adi, Pancharatri ki vidhi vina, ekanti ki harer bhakti utpataye kalpate. So if we can take inspiration from our ancestors, we have not written the Shastra. We are always living in derived realization. We have taken realization. Even the prayers are derived. When Arjun prays to Durga, that is all we all pray in the Durga Puja. So all these things we get inspired from other people. So without delay, let us welcome Sri Nilesh Oak.
Namaste Aditya ji. Good morning to you, and happy to be here.
No, we are very happy when you're here. So it's a mutual. Now coming to the important topic, like when we see the people, especially Americans, look up when they see an Indian, a general image is that he's a very spiritual person. I'm coming from India. And it is a widespread thing that Indians are known to be spiritual, calm, peaceful. But when the Indians start explaining their culture, they explain in a very defensive way, as if they're disconnected from it. Like, one way is that, like what Americans like is, I do this. There is nothing like that in the Indian culture. Why do you think it's like that?
Okay, great question, Aditya ji. And the answer is simple, I think, also humorous, and also something that everyone, our audience who is listening, can relate to it, especially the students, okay, which is this. It is true that people looking at Indians usually would have this assumption, and you're right about that these people come from a great tradition, they come from a great civilization, a deeper tradition, sadhana, all of this. Against this perception, and today we will talk about that in the evidence too, the perception versus the facts, okay? Against this perception, the reality is, for majority of the Indians who come to, and we'll just talk America, but that can be said for many parts of the world. But majority of the Indians coming to America, or those who end up interacting with the rest of the Americans, non-Indian Americans, the outsiders may not realize, but the Indians know the truth, and that's why they struggle. So you said when somebody asks them about their culture, or also tell me about Hinduism, for example, or tell me about Sanatan Vedic Dharma, and they will give an answer which is vague, confusing, okay, and leaves more questions to the listener than answers their question. The analogy, and it doesn't have to be analogy, because frankly, I think it's a fact, is this: while Indian will take pride, and this is called ahankar, false ego, they will take pride about their culture, about the fact they belong to Hinduism, about the fact they belong to Sanatan Vedic Dharma. Many of them simply are not aware of what it is. What are some of the basic tenets? What are some of the basic foundations, basic principles? And the most important, in my opinion, is that majority of them are completely devoid, separated from the sadhana, which to the credit of most of the other religions of the world. Okay, and so if you're talking America, I'll say Christianity, for example, Judaism, Islam, I mean, whatever the percentage, you will see. So Islam, you will see people praying 5 times. Again, there are exceptions who may not, but mostly they will. Church, you will see people will go to the church. It might have become a social affair in some sense, but yeah, they will go. They are going there as a part of their sadhana. And Judaism, like I have a Chabad right here, just not far from here, and I will see like Jewish people in their traditional attire, okay, going with the whole family to this. Now, Indians, you sometimes will find in the temple, but is there a discipline about it? No. And again, I'm not saying that the temple itself going is a must, because Hinduism has a different way of a sadhana. Sorry, just 1 second. Different way of a sadhana. And therefore, I think because there is so much confusion as to, I'm blabbering myself now, just answering that, but I'll add one more thing. Many times my wife Ashwini and me will go to different places, social gathering, and just some discussion will come up. Usually people will start talking about my research work. This is not uncommon. And immediately, even the fact I'm doing research on the historical aspects, our folks are so dazed up that they will not make a connection of that with the religion, meaning immediately they think that is a spiritual. Okay, now of course there is a spiritual dimension to it. And do you know what will happen? So suppose you ask them, so what do you do, or general discussion, and they will say, because they think now the religion is being discussed, the dharma is being discussed. That is their wrong assumption. They don't even know what is being talked about. We are talking science here. I mean, in Indian context, there is no difference. So immediately, the kind of comments they typically you will hear, I have heard this time and time again. It's boring, it's tiring, it's irritating. They will say, oh, well, I'm more spiritual. I am not religious. And I'll tell you what Ashwini responds. You will love this. I mean, she's like a brutal, straight, right in the face. Do you know what she will say? And she will tell them to their face with a smile, or not much for a smile. I would say with a smile, she wouldn't. She will say, so when somebody says, oh, I'm more spiritual, I'm not religious. And Ashwini's comment typically will be, that means you don't do anything. So that's right. So that is the confusion that comes out when somebody asks them, because they are clueless about what Sanatan Vedic Dharma is, and most of them do not do any sadhana, period.
No, there is a movie, Amitabh Bachchan, Sari Duniya Ka Boj Hum Uthate Hain, Log Aate Aur Chale Jate Hain. I think that song has become very relevant to most of the Hindus living in the West. At least in my experience, I have seen, not most, I'll say many of them, because the point is, we have to focus on ourselves. See, when we become a good sadhaka, means we have a morning practice or something we do at our home. Because when American asked me how many temples of Hindus are there, I said more than 6 million in US. Because in Sanatan Dharma culture, every home becomes a temple. So you that's our culture. Plus, we have outside community centers, I call them, where you can go and worship together. Also, both are important. So another problem is that we, as a community, as to become a good ambassador to Americans. See, many of the intelligent Americans come to Sanatan Dharma, Hinduism, because they find something different than the church and the Judaism.
Yes.
But when they go to the temple and they see a non-serious, casual approach, and our functions like Diwali and Holi, they just see in Hindi we say hurdang, like it's a wild party.
Yeah.
Literally for them, it's a wild party. Now, they don't make any sense out of it. What is the spiritual significance of that? And so they get more disaffected, and it actually solidifies their faith in what the church says, that Hindus have no culture. Pantheism is not good. Pantheism is a category in which American academics put Sanatan Dharma Hinduism as.
Yes.
And you and I may object to it, and we may do it, But majority of the Hindus in USA and other places, I don't know, but majority of them, they give that impression out. Like there is no
Mhm.
discussion in the Holi of Prahlad Holika
Hmm.
pastime.
Hmm.
There is no discussion on in the Diwali of Sri
Yeah.
Ram's coming back to Ayodhya. Good
Yeah.
over evil. You know. So, what is your view on that?
Well, the same careless and casual attitude that you're referring to extends to many spheres of life. Like in last 5 6 years, I have seen it in two areas because I was focusing on those two specific areas. One is conferences. Like the conferences related to the Sanatan Vedic Dharma, related to the Indian civilization. Uh, Mostly held in India, I would say. Sometime when they are done in America, I mean, I'll tell you, the Waves is a very important group, and Mr. Shashi Kejriwal and Professor Balram Singh and many others involved. I mean, they have done a great job, and the quality of those conferences is truly, truly remarkable. Okay. On the other hand, I would say, I mean, these are exceptions rather, but that careless and casual attitude is like what you said, jatra, a festival, carnival. I mean, it just, we are going and participating, and that itself like should give you some kind of, take you closer to mukti. I mean, that is a very careless attitude or very casual common misunderstanding that most of the Indians have. So therefore, you will see that in a conference. I mean, I'm just talking deliberately these two, which I have seen repeatedly over last 5+ years. And the second thing is what I saw with the academia, in the sense, Indian academia, I'm talking especially, and the PhD thesis. So I'll tell you quickly what I did. When Srimati Smriti Irani, she was a HR minister, and she did many great things. But one of the things she did is she wanted at least make the whatever is there in the academic setting to make it available, accessible to people. So she got into this project where all the PhD theses of folks are scanned, in a PDF format, and they are accessible through internet. So when somebody sent me that link, I said, okay, I mean, my interest being Mahabharata, I mean, I have many interests, but people tend to know Mahabharata, Ramayana. So I said, Mahabharata, I went there and I said, show me the latest 200 theses. Immediately it showed me that. And I possibly downloaded close to 100, less than 100 latest PhD theses related to Mahabharata from India. And again, what could I see? I could see an extremely casual, extremely careless attitude in how those theses are written. In fact, you know what? I'm very, because I have gone through them one by one, I'll tell you, they do not even meet the standard of some project paper done at the 10th grade level. They do not meet, I'm telling you, a standard of a 10th grade student doing some kind of a paper. It will be rejected and the person might be failed into that level. But now that person is, hundreds of those folks in an Indian context are holding a PhD and walking with a great pride that they have a PhD in a Mahabharata or some aspect of Indian civilization. It is the same careless and casual attitude comes because again, they don't study and then don't do sadhana. Abhyasa yoga yuktena. There is no yoga and there is no abhyas. Okay. To the extent, sometimes the conferences will be happening and some people who are professors or like junior professor, but even the seniors also very chaotic. I mean, it's frustrating. In fact, I have decided now that for most part, with the exception, very few exceptions, I will simply not go and waste my time at the indie conferences. It is that much of a waste of a time. Okay, so that's my. I mean, I'm just giving you feedback to what you asked from two specific instances, but you can go in any walks of life and you can see it. Even when it comes to civic sense. I mean, haven't you seen the Indians when they are here? They will behave with the civic sense that America has indeed cultivated, like keeping the places clean and whatnot. As soon as they enter India, as if they lose that civic sense. Okay, which means what? I mean, you are just behaving so that somebody doesn't put you down. but it's not your intrinsic understanding that you have to have that civic sense no matter where you are, to the best of your ability at least. You are on the mute. You went on the mute there.
Even when an American goes to Mexico, they also lose their civic sense. Also, I've seen that. And when they go to India, India has only two results on Americans: either they become completely spiritual, or they completely get turned off by India, because
Mhm.
it has two impact. But 90% of the time, India changes every single American.
Yeah, especially they gave a sufficient time, which is to say, if they're going for a few days and just from a airport to the hotel to some exotic place, exotic location, no, that will not change them. I mean, even then they are changed. I mean, I know of personal stories of many. They hear the voices, and somebody tells them that you should stay here or visit the place and whatnot.
Yeah.
But especially if you give some time, it's just amazing that I have seen many Americans, even Europeans, Australians, they told me like how the place grew up on them.
Grew up.
And I truly admire that, because in all fairness, I will say when I go to India, uh, I mean, my love for India is like unbound, there's no limits to it. But actually, in the day-to-day affairs, I struggle, frankly. I struggle like in terms of traveling. If I have a function where I'm speaking, just the entire arrangement and all the, in my mind, the fluff that happens before actually I will get to speak, and I may be exhausted by talking to people before actually the event happens.
Most of us have that problem. Even I have a problem, because I cannot deal with those emotions. Sometimes we're disconnected to large
Hmm.
extent.
So
And
partly we may be responsible. But I mean, it's not to put all blame on the
yeah,
other side.
we're
Partly you
talking
and
about
me to
ourselves
blame.
only, ourselves
Yeah.
only. But my accent has not changed. So
Hmm.
I've not taken on an American accent, because people, they comment on the videos that your accent has not changed. Do you still live in the US, or you're back in India? But in America also, I speak an Indian accent, and people understand because I speak slowly, and
Hmm.
people get it. So
Yeah.
so we can get started on brings to the topic of evidences, because this is the
Right.
major problem. When the American is now in their church, they are not allowed to ask questions. In the universities, there is a law, which you are saying or somebody else was saying, there is a law where you cannot ask too many questions. So,
Hmm.
so now the questioning is stopped. So now only birds and dogs and other people can ask questions. Humans cannot. That is
Yeah.
the state of free speech in USA today.
Right.
And so yes, so you're saying something.
Yeah. So no, I was going to say, get into my subject. So the evidence, like people, everyone talks of evidence. That's not the problem. Okay, everyone is talking of evidence, like in a pros and con position. So people who very with a dedication read my works, comprehend it, and communicate. They talk of evidence. The people who object to my work, and I'm just talking myself, but that's true. They also talk of evidence. Everyone is talking evidence, everyone says something, and they assume this is all logical, this is all scientific. But the fact is, from a logical point of view, from a scientific point of view, and I'll use the more words, from a jnana point of view and from a vijnana point of view. Okay, vijnana is loosely translated as a science, and for most part it is correct. But vijnana has something more. It's a realized knowledge, realized knowledge. So sometimes you read a science book and you know something, that's not realized knowledge. So for example, you read a book on Newton's laws or Einstein's relativity. It's a book on science. But if you read it, and even if you read and understand, that is a jnana, that is not a vijnana yet, because it's not your personal realized experience. And that's what we are going to talk. Also, why to truly know the Vijnan, we don't need like a very complicated background or something, because Vijnan is actually a common sense. Okay, that's also the important thing. Like, just like, therefore, for spirituality in a generic sense, or for Adhyatma, one doesn't need to have a PhD, one doesn't need to have a knowledge of so many things. A simple spark would do,
That's
but
right.
that spark must be there, right? Spark must be there.
True.
So yeah, you go ahead if you want to add comments, and then I'll start sharing.
Yeah, you can start sharing. One
Okay,
comment I had was like,
go
for
ahead.
example, you mentioned about the spark,
Yeah.
and this spark you need to fan to become a fire,
Hmm.
and just like you bellows, you put, so that spark is flamed by our
Hmm.
sadhana, which is
Hmm.
missing in many places, isn't it?
Hmm.
Which is the biggest problem today.
Yes, and see, this is a great question, Aditya. This is a twofold challenge. One is, I see, for example, take, I mean, if you're talking of religions in a sense, uh, with my limited observation, I would say, I have seen, say, Judaism and Islam. Okay, as far as that particular sadhana, they actually do it the best. Now, that's not to say they may be doing is absolutely correct or anything, but as far as the sadhana part goes, like doing it 5 times, 5 prayers, or Judaism, I mean, Jewish people going with a great confidence, pride in their traditional attire. But I'm talking the traditional attire of whatever 2000 plus years, going to their place of worship. It's very admirable to me because they are doing it. Now, that's the one fold problem, which is to say when others don't do it, like especially the followers of Sanatan Dharma, majority don't do it. Now, the second aspect I'm talking is like the Shraddha. But remember, if we talk of a Shraddha as a reverence, as a conviction, we say that's good. Well, that by itself is not good or bad, because Krishna talks about Shraddha of a tamasi kind, Shraddha of a rajasi kind, Shraddha of a sattvic kind.
Absolutely.
Okay. And this is where people need to distinguish. Same thing I'm going to bring it here. Say in an Indian context, uh, two parties who disagree on something, they both could be very pro India or pro civilization, but their conviction can be of a tamasi kind or a rajasi kind or a sattvic kind. So just because somebody says good things about India, doesn't it immediately make that person necessarily good for Indian civilization? Because he or she may mean good, but they may not have a ability, capability, skill to do good to India or to good to Indian civilization or even humanity. Somebody may be sympathetic to humanity, may not have a good stuff. And that gets back to what this evidence is and the distinguishing between, say, ontological versus epistemological. And that's what I will talk briefly. So, as a scientific framework, Aditya, uh, in the modern science, we talk about the central triangle, the triangle of explanation, prediction, testing in the context of a theory and in the context of a background knowledge. Now, in the Indian context, at least last 10 years, I would say I brought it. I keep on emphasizing this. And many people write to me and saying, Nileshji, thank you for doing this. Nobody was even talking of scientific method in the Indology for last 10 plus years. But now, I mean, before 10 years rather, now everyone talks about it. Even I get the emails, and thanks to you, Aditya ji, with the Sattology series that we are doing. And there are many folks who tell me with through email that it has become a family event for them to watch Sattology talks. I mean, Sattology talks in general, I presume, but Sattology talks of mine and yours and mind communication. It has become a family event, like just like they will sit down and watch the sitcom during the dinner time in India. It is very much like that. They do it this, and many people tell me that, which is a kudos to you for all that great stuff that you are doing. But so they're saying nobody was talking of scientific method. People will use science, but no one would tell them what science is. Right now, what is the beauty of this? One quick thing is our Indian Darshana Shastra are very much talking about this in finer details, 20 levels deeper than even what modern science discusses for thousands of years ago. I mean, for thousands of years and thousands of years ago. One thing that is lost on many, both in the East and the West, I mean, around the world, is that where science begins. And the science begins, it's very important to know. People will say, do you have a theory? And some person says, yeah, I have also theory. Or they say, well, I can have a theory. Or you want a theory? I can create a theory. Give me 2 days. I mean, how nonsensical is that? They don't even understand. After I ask the question, they're not going to create a theory. If they have done some original work, they would already have a tough unsolved problem, the toughest unsolved problem that they tried to solve, and therefore they built a theory. So it's also one part that is missed many times. And this comes back to our sadhana. For example, like why do sadhana? Many of the, we just discussed, many of the Indians don't do sadhana because they have not understood the importance of sadhana.
That's right.
Okay. The sadhana you are doing is like a person who, like our Olympic is just over and somebody does the weightlifting of whatever and gets the award. You know, if one person just goes today and says, oh, well, I think I can also lift 100 pounds, and they try to do it, it will not happen.
Okay.
It is the sadhana of a long time that comes handy when required.
That's right.
If you have to run away from a thief, you know, or somebody trying to hit you or steal something from you, if you have practiced for days and weeks and months, then you will able to do it, not suddenly the last minute. Anyways, so toughest unsolved problem is where you begin, where the science begins, okay, or adhyatma begins, spirituality begins. You should have a problem. Isn't that a story of a Buddha? Somebody went to him and he said, Buddha Bhagwan, whatever, sir, I want to understand philosophy and spirituality. And Buddha just gave it's like a football game. He said, pull the number 22 on him. So his shishya took this guy, took him to the river, and just pushed his head inside below the water. And this guy was totally shaken. They held him down there for a significant time, like until he was like really fighting for his life. They pulled him out and they said, okay, now let's go see see Buddha again. Now this is story told in many ways. Now this guy was really shaken, and he came to Buddha and says, what was that? I mean, I just came to ask for a philosophy and science and spirituality, adhyatma. And Buddha said, when when my shishya ducked your head below the water, what did you feel? And he said, oh, I was desperate for my life, desperate to just breathe. And then Buddha said, when you feel that much desperate, just like you felt for your life, that much desperate for philosophy or science or spirituality, adhyatma, then only come to me. Otherwise, you are wasting everybody's time. Okay. So that's the nature of this science also. Unless you have a toughest unsolved problem, not solved by any other theory, you are wasting time. I mean, you are just creating some junk. That's what it is. And that's what you find into those 100 plus PhD theses that I talked about. Okay. Absolutely wasteful. I mean, the only use I can see, if they can be printed on the paper, now this was on the PDF that I read, they can be used to heat the water for my shower. Absolutely no other value. Anyways, I had vented enough there. So toughest unsolved problem, to solve that, you propose a theory. And what is a theory? It's a conjecture, it's a guess, it's a plausible solution. You don't know if it's a true, but something interesting happens. Once you propose a theory, it must lead to three things. One is, immediately it should very beautifully, very succinctly, in a crisp fashion, it should define what is the evidence that comes under the purview, within the purview of that theory. It's very important. And that's how, therefore, putting a statement of a theory is not again a casual and careless exercise. Aisa yaar ho jata hai. No, nothing like that. Lot of thought goes into it, lot of thinking goes into it, lot of meditation, dhyana, dharana, samadhi goes into simply even creating a simple appearance, simple statement of a theory. Because that should tell you what is evidence, what is relevant evidence, what is not. And you will only talk of relevant evidence, like Arjuna focusing only on the left eye of a parrot before throwing the arrow. You are not going to look at anything else, not going to waste your time, not going to waste other people's time. Something else, that theory also tells you, by virtue of its statement, by virtue of its nature, what is going to be the background knowledge that you're going to make use of. Now, this is another problem, Aditya. Like people they talk about the theory, they will object to something, but they really are objecting to background knowledge, something that is well established. And I'm not saying there is any problem objecting to background knowledge, but then we should change the subject what we are fighting about. Then we are fighting about the background knowledge. Let's take that as a subject for discussion and not a particular theory or particular claim. People don't understand that. Again, you started with that question on a simple about the Indians' behavior and Indians' confusion when Americans listen to them. It's same thing, because everyone, even the well-known names in this Indology field, take it carelessly and casually. Okay, they will talk generic stuff, but ask them about specific, and they will just run away. Okay, find the excuse to run away. So the theory tells you what evidence should is included, what is inside the box, what is outside the box, what is inside the scope, what is outside the scope. It also explains immediately what is the background knowledge. And it also, the theory statement should be such that the evidence that comes within its scope should be objectively testable. So that's three powerful things are achieved by the statement of a theory. Now, against this, compare when I ask my critics, I said, what is your theory? They say, oh, well, oh, you want a theory? I can get to you in 2 days. And then they come up with a utter junk, utter nonsense after 2-3 days. Okay. And I'll show you some examples another time. Okay. Now what happens? This has been done, but not completely done. Now one has to use the tantra yukti. One has to use the ingenious methods to see how we can actually test. So yes, in principle, the theory is making it objectively testable. How do you objectively test it? When you do that, two beautiful things emerge out of it. In fact, it's a demand of a science that those two things must come out. If they do not come out, they have done something wrong. What are those two things? Once you do the objective testing, first thing, that objective testing should match with the explanation, which should match with the evidence. So evidence is saying something, or evidence is showing something, and the objective testing brings it together. It's called correspondence. The truth is a correspondence with the facts. Okay. So now we have a pratyaksha, and that's why Sanatana Vedic Dharma puts highest emphasis on a pratyaksha. That is not to say it doesn't give importance. No, it talks of avayav. Nyaya Darshana talks about avayav as these 5 elements. Okay. From pratidnya to hetu, to udaharana, to application, and then nigaman, which is the final conclusion. So one thing is, the objective testing pratyaksha should explain the evidence, should go back to evidence, it should correspond with the evidence. And second most important thing, equally important thing, is that it should lead to an inference, it should lead to a prediction, it should lead to some conclusion. And how is this prediction? It is prescriptive. So it says, oh, based on this, it appears that this happened here, or this happened in here, meaning whether it's a time, place, or some particular logical context. It is also proscriptive. It will also say usually that this, we can say that this thing definitely did not happen here, definitely did not happen here. It could be geographical space, it could be time, okay, either a space or a time, but that's what it will say. This is very important, okay. It's, in that sense, it's very restrictive. Arundhati Vasishta, we have talked a lot, but I thought I'll just take this as a quick example to demonstrate this. So I said all the theory building begins with the toughest unsolved problem. So for example, my journey in 1995 or so started with this Arundhati Vasishta observation. Now, why this is the toughest unsolved problem? Well, this is the toughest unsolved problem because all the existing theories, all the existing researchers, all the existing Indologists, existing astronomers in India, outside India, anywhere in the world, simply could not fathom why Vyasadeva would write such a thing in the Mahabharata text. And Vyasa is saying at the time of Mahabharata that that Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta. So to solve that problem, I said, okay, what does it mean Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishta? And I'll tell you the distinction, that confusion, why people give a fake answers or a vague answers, like when people ask about sadhana, that comes here. I gave you 2 examples of a conferences and another example of a PhD thesis. The third example that I'm going to give you here is when people do original research, or people do research. Many of them cannot do original, so they just fake it. And I'll give you examples of that. So here I proposed a theory. So if Arundhati Vasishta observation, Vyasa is saying it has to be visual. Now, when I'm saying it has to be visual, now somebody may have a different idea, and I will discuss that if I get time. And I'll say why those are wrong. Not just like, oh, somebody's opinion. No, that's a BS. I mean, it's like a saying, oh, everybody has an opinion. Yes, everybody can have an opinion, just like everyone has a mouth and eyes and so on and so forth. Doesn't mean what everyone talks is correct. Similarly, everyone can have an opinion, but most of it is garbage. I mean, one has to acknowledge that. So here I propose, and I'm not saying this is the only way you can propose a theory. You can propose another theory, but the importance is that it should follow those three things that we talked about. So let's discuss here. All astronomy descriptions of Mahabharata text are visual observations of Mahabharata times. Okay, which means that Arundhati should be seen walking ahead of Vasishtha at the time of Mahabharata. If you're claiming certain time, Arundhati should be seen not just by Nilesh in his own mind, in his subjective judgment, in the objective view of everyone. Everyone should be able to see Arundhati walking ahead of Vasishtha. As simple as that. Now, so remember, once you propose a theory, it tells you which evidence is in scope, which evidence is outside scope. If all astronomy descriptions of Mahabharata are actual observations, anything that has a flavor of astronomy and in the Mahabharata text becomes the evidence. We must include it. We cannot exclude even a single evidence, period. No ifs, no buts. So that's one thing. But there are two more things that the theory does. Another thing theory does, immediately it tells you what is going to be the background knowledge. Vyaptidnya, okay? Agama, Shabda. What is going to be the background knowledge? Very simple. Look at the theory statement. All astronomy descriptions of Mahabharata text are visual observations of Mahabharata times. I see some references from the Mahabharata and some context of astronomy, like visual observations in the astronomy sense. So what is my background knowledge? The Mahabharata text, every possible manuscript that is available to us, and our knowledge of astronomy. Again, we are not going to be binary and, like say this versus that. No, astronomy, modern astronomy, ancient Indian astronomy, ancient world astronomy. If there is something coming from the Mayan civilization, yeah, we say, does it have any relevance to it? So anything we know on astronomy is part of it. Anything that we know about the Mahabharata text and internal evidence is part of it. Anything outside of this is not part of the picture. Why I'm saying this, Aditya? Because when I will do this, and then people will say, but where is the archaeological evidence? Now, that question by itself is not bad, but that question is extremely stupid, okay, because it is not relevant here. Because what is the statement of a theory? All astronomy descriptions of a Mahabharata text or visual observations of a Mahabharata times. There is no room for a pots and a pan. There is no room for other linguistics aspect. Only things that relate to this. So linguistics is important, but only as it relates to the Mahabharata text evidence, nothing outside. Okay, this is very important. Now, third thing that the theory also does is what? It should lead to the objective testing. We should be able to use the Tantra Yukti, ingenuity, creativity to find ways to objectively test that evidence. Now, this is what took me 15 years. Now, we have heard that story, objective testing of this evidence from 1995 to 2009. Doesn't mean I was just sitting in a meditation and suddenly it occurred. I have tried in every possible way. I mean, that itself will fill a book, which I don't think I want to even write. Okay. But when finally it did, now remember, when you objectively test it, it should lead to two things. What are those two things? One thing it led to immediately, sorry, I will go back. One thing, actually, the objective testing showed that yes, there was indeed a time when Arundhati could be walked ahead of Vasishtha. Now, see, therefore, a revolutionary original work only happens if you start with the toughest unsolved problem, because you solve it and therefore it's original, therefore it's amazing. Okay, all the astronomers, all the Indologists, all the knowledgeable people were saying this is impossible in the very order of nature. Astronomically, this is not possible. Arundhati Vasishtha is such a fixed, steady combination. They don't have much proper motions. Even their both proper motions are such that they both are going in the southeast direction. So not much change. So what is it that's causing it? So finally, I showed that it can do it. Afterwards, I also established the causal principle behind it. That is the Karya Karana Bhav that you can see in all our Shad Darshanas. One of the key element of Vijnana Buddhi, scientific acumen, to establish the Karya Karana Bhav. So that's one thing was done. That's what I mean by it should go back and connect, okay, correspondence with the facts. So correspondence with the evidence and fact, they should have a correspondence. Therefore, just reading something in some grantha is not the evidence. It is the beginning of evidence. Okay, the evidence begins. But remember, like you said it, Aditya, Shruti, Smriti, Purana, Adi, that all four things, they have to come together. Or as Krishna says, what is that? Shruti, Pratyaksha, Maitiyam, Anumanam, Chatushtayam. The quadrangulation of four is required. So that is what is being done. The second aspect, it also told exactly when this Arundhati could be seen walking ahead of Vasishtha, as stated by Vyasa at the time of Mahabharat war. And so in 2009, when I found out this time period from 11,091 BC through 45 BC. And 10 years after me, Siddhartha Chabra, okay, is also also in the sense, not that you and me are or are not, we are too, Hare Krishna devotee, and based in Michigan. He wanted to test my claim and say, is this true? Actually, he did it with the latest data, and it gave him even a tighter interval from 10,248 BC to 4636 BC. Okay, so remember, I showed you what the theory should able to do, the scientific framework, logic of scientific method, or the avayava of a Nyaya Darshana, and that's what I'm giving you demonstration. Quickly, I'll go this and I'll show you, going back to our confusion or people being very careless and casual. That carelessness and casualness, it comes in the sadhana. It comes in about their knowledge of the Sanatan Vedic Dharma, but it also comes into many other aspects of life, such as like the PhD thesis that I talked about. Many people don't know why they did the PhD in the subject they did. Now, sometime Aditya, I told them, okay, I understand. Sometime it is the professor who will say, I want you to work on this. Fine. But then isn't it the duty of that so-called PhD student to ask the professor, why is this subject important? What specific aspect of this area is not been addressed yet, not been solved yet? So even when a professor may decide, dictate or determine the scope of a study, the student needs to still ask these questions. And there are many professors who will ask me, I asked them, I said, why did you work on this particular subject? And they would say, I don't know. Other than their professor asked them to work on that. And mostly it is happening in humanities, but frankly, I will tell you that has happened in the areas of general science, even sometime in engineering. And I says, my God, what kind of time you spent on, what kind of things you do. Anyways, so this is that particular verse, that where in Vasudev is telling Dhritarashtra that, my dear friend, my dear king, yes, the war is going to begin tomorrow, but many signs I am saying, good and bad, and just want to bring it to your attention. And one of them is here said, Yachesha, many planetary observation he mentions, many other things, many other also impossible sounding things, like the murtis are laughing, and a peacock is walking in a certain direction and whatnot. But no, those are other type of observations, not astronomy observations, and therefore they will not be part of this. Because remember what the theory is, all astronomy descriptions are actual factual visual observations of Mahabharata times. Ya Chaisha Visruta Rajas Trailoke Sadhu Sammata Arundhati Tayapesha Vasishta Prashtata Kruta. Now, why this is a tough problem? Because astronomically, everyone thought this is impossible. Why is that? Because in our times, if you look at it, now this is, focusing on the North Pole at the center. And if you take a big exposure photograph through the night, then what you will see, or 24 hours, and combine the photograph, you will see that the stars going around in an anti-clockwise direction in the northern hemisphere around the pole star, they will create their tracks like this. Okay, so they are going in the anti-clockwise direction. So that tells us who is ahead, who is behind. Now I'm just showing you that same picture from our times, from 21st century. What do you see? Remember, the motion is anti-clockwise, okay, going from right to the left. And in our times, the Vasishta is ahead, Arundhati is behind. But Mahabharata is saying Vasishta, Arundhati was ahead. Now, from astronomy, we know that Vasishtha is walking ahead of Arundhati for last 6,500 plus years. What does that tell you? That's again that scientific framework. We look at the evidence, the pratyaksha, that Vasishtha is walking ahead for last 6,500 years. What is one of the conclusion of it? One of the conclusion of it is that we go back to the observation, Arundhati is walking ahead. He said, Arundhati is not walking ahead. And so last 6,000, when is that? Last 6,500 years, until 4508 BCE, going backwards. He's saying, therefore, Mahabharata did not happen in the last 6,500 years. Aditya, will be surprised to know many people claiming themselves to be dharmic, is considered public intellectuals in the social media, in the conferences. They do not understand this. This is very simple logic. They do not understand this. Okay, quickly, I'm going to finish this and the last two slides. Now, when I studied this for 15 years, what I found, and this was very much in the 2009 finally, there are these 2 years. Why this 11,091 45 is BC is important? Because those are the 2 years before this and after this, Vasishtha is walking ahead. Before for 11,091 BC, Vasishtha is walking ahead. After 4508 BC, Vasishtha is walking ahead. Now, beautiful, in between this time period, Arundhati is walking ahead. And of course, I'm just showing you 5561 BC because that's what the year of Mahabharata war is. And so you can see actually the time step of 5561 BC. Here, again, motion is from right to the left, anti-clockwise. Arundhati is walking ahead of Vasishtha. This is just Olympic is over. So, think of the 100-meter run and 400-meter run. The finally, when you come to the finish line, think of that meridian as the finish line. Arundhati has already got the gold medal there. Vasishtha is going for the silver. Okay, something like that. Now, so based on that, that's what that this is where you should look for the year of Mahabharata war. So remember what I said. First thing, there is a correspondence with the facts. And one more thing is, it is prescriptive. So what is it saying? Mahabharata war happened sometime between these two dates, or sometime between these two finer dates arrived by Siddhartha Chabraji. Okay, and my year happens to be there. So this is prescriptive. What is prescriptive? Mahabharata war did not happen any time after 4508 BC, any time after 4636 BC, or any time before 10,248 BC, any time before 11,091 BC. Quickly, 2 slides and we will stop. So now I was telling you that some people say why we need to do sadhana. Like that was our point. So therefore, people even struggle to explain what Sanatana Vedic Dharma is, what holy is, what is the significance of Deepavali. Whereas if you go into the Christianity, if it's an Easter celebration, they will exactly able to tell what is the religious significance of it. If it's a Christmas day, they will able to tell exactly the significance of that day. Not to the Hindus. They will be confused. Some people think it is like this, other people think like this. Okay, no clarity. Or the Aditya, they are confused. Like say, for example, from a historical perspective, when I give a date of Ram killing Ravana. Now, Ram killed Ravana on the Amavasya day. But they will try to match that with the current celebration time. For example, the Diwali day. And they will say, how come it is done on this day, but Valmiki Ramayana research is saying it is on another day. Well, you have to understand a historical reality versus how we celebrate it. Like in America, isn't it true for many of the Hindu celebrations that say the Ganesh festival may occur on Ganesh Chaturthi may happen on a Wednesday, but the Ganesh festival celebration is going to happen on a weekend, right? I'm not saying it's a right or wrong. I'm just saying that is a practical thing that happens. Same thing, our ancestors, great sages, they combine these celebrations for particular day. Otherwise, our civilization is so deep, so ancient that we will be celebrating something every day and not working at all. Okay, so to solve that problem, they came up with this ingenious solution that many of the celebrations, many times, are combine it into one day. It could be a day of Akshaya Tritiya, it could be a day of Deepavali day, it could be a day of a Dashara, Vijayadashmi, and many of the victory celebrations are combined. That's important to understand. It's a very basic common sense, but that is where people will ask that same question repeatedly in a fashion in a social media, not bother to do their own research and waste everybody's time. Okay, so they may be sincere about it, but they are still careless and casual. That's my point. Okay, now let's look at where does this come from. This confusion also comes from this ontology versus epistemological view of the truth. Okay, now there are good things on both sides. This is not a binary good or bad, but it's important to recognize the bad aspect of it too. So objective is in the sense of what? Truth as a correspondence with facts. Now, that's a great thing. That's how the science is based on. Okay. Now, what could be the limitations of it? The same limitations that science has. For example, is there a reincarnation? Is there a life after somebody dies? I mean, is there some existence after death? The science is not, as it stands today, is not capable of addressing that question. With the development of science, it will be possible, but it has its limitations. So correspondence with the fact is extremely powerful, okay, but it also has its limitations. Let me go quickly. The another one is a objective probability. What does that mean? In a simple sense, you can take out those 300 observations of Mahabharata, and for a given claim, such as say my claim, 5561 BC, you can very nicely, smoothly, one by one decide which of those corroborate with the date of Mahabharata, like 5561 BC, which of those do not corroborate with 5561 BC. And just as a crude score, I'll tell you, the score is like a 290 to 10, like 290 plus corroborate, corresponds with the facts for 5561 BC, about 10 do not correspond with the fact. Now, you know what happens? These careless and casual researchers of Mahabharata, they will take those 10, which I have already told them, told people through my books, and they will say, look, this one observation of Mahabharata does not agree with a Nilesh of 5561 BC. What they do not tell people is not even a single or more than one or two observations of the entire Mahabharata text, 300 plus, do not agree for their date. They may be able to match one in a very illogical and unscientific fashion, but rest of the 300 plus simply do not match. They don't tell to the people. And again, going back to your first point, people are so careless and casual who are consuming this knowledge. They will just come and say, but Nilesh, you know, that person is saying this doesn't match. Because the person doesn't want to do any sadhana of his own. The person is not willing to watch the videos. The person is not willing to read the book, but wants to participate and act like as if they are knowledgeable. That is a false ego. That is ahankar. Okay. So you can do objective probability, like 290 match here, 10 do not match. You can do a chi-square test for each of the researchers by taking each researcher's scores and say, is this Nilesh Oak score of 290 to 10 is statistically different than remaining 130 plus Mahabharata researchers. And you will find that is the case. P-value, I can tell you before doing a statistical test, the p-value is 0.000. Very impressive. Okay. Objective randomness. Okay. So I will not spend time on that, but sometime we will just take that bullet. What is objective randomness and how you can statistically test it? Which is to say, in a simple language, that because our text have gone through some modifications because of what? It's not some deliberate modification. Now, that might have happened in the sense of interpolation, but for most part, these are the translation error, transposition error, transliteration error, somebody copying something, making an error. So that's what you can easily check. A few errors, yeah, no big deal. Okay. And then equiprobability. Again, this is a subject that deserves attention on its own, like physical versus situational symmetry. We will take that another time. But just to go fast through this, now against this, most of the Indology researchers, Indic researchers, even the pro-Indic researchers, and I will say, just because I'm using Mahabharata today, but that applies for Mahabharata, Ramayana, Veda, whatever, Saraswati, River Saraswati, they discuss this evidence in this fashion. Which is that subjective and psychological truth as a property of our state of mind or knowledge or belief. For example, the Arundhati Vasishta that I just showed you, how hard, empirical, practical, okay, physically observable, pratyaksha evidence that is. Now, someone like a great researcher, otherwise great researcher, like Shrikant Talagiri, talks about Arundhati Vasishta as simply something in the mind of a Vyasa. That's I'm just giving you how you can take something so beautiful, empirical, and pratyaksha, and in with a careless and a casual attitude, because you don't understand it, simply turn instantaneously into something as crass as subjective and psychological. It's in the mind of a Vyasa. Or say someone like Dr. Konrades, my good friend. Well, Shrikant Talagiriji also, we know each other very well. But Konrades will say, I don't know what exactly happened with Arundhati Vasishta, but Nilesh, you are wrong. Okay, so that's very subjective, psychological. It's a psychoanalyzing. Okay, that's how people will get, and then we will blame the Western Indologists like Wendy Donier. Well, Wendy Donier definitely does utter nonsense. I mean, that's well known. But look yourself in the mirror. I mean, just take that same mirror and look yourself into it. The second one, corresponding to those each four numbers, subjective probability, which is like a degree of rational belief based upon our total knowledge. Do you know how that goes, Aditya? It's like saying, well, but you know what? I am studying this for 50 years. I'm studying this for 20 years. And based on my knowledge, I don't think this is possible. I don't think Nilesh is right. Now, that's a BS. That's a subjective probability based on what? There is no measurement. This is your state of mind again, okay, based on your belief. Okay, how do we measure this belief? That's the problem of the subjective psychological aspect if you apply to science. Lack of objective randomness and the equiprobability, I did not discuss it in detail, but I'll say here they will simply say, oh, I don't know. Or they will not say anything, or they will run away from the discussion. They will run away from the debate. Okay, that is that lack of knowledge. Now, what I want to show you is that this is not a negative comment about the subjective or psychological aspects or epistemology at all. Okay, I'm going to show you, and this is my next one is my last slide. So this is undesired, it is useless, and it's a wasteful. But is there a positive side to this subjective, psychological, mental thinking with the mind, thinking with the buddhi, or epistemology? Absolutely, there is. Because otherwise, we cannot even come up with this tantra yukti, ingenuity, creativity to solve problems. So yes, there is a room for it. And this is my last slide. So on the objective side, you can talk about truth, you can talk about testability, you can talk about the explanatory and predictive power. For example, once we solved Arundhati Vasishta, immediately it said, Mahabharat war, therefore, it appears, did happen between 10,248 BC and 4636 BC. That's the predictive power. That same thing also said it did not happen any time outside those two bounds, anytime after 4508 BC or anytime before 11,091 BC. That is also predictive power. And what is the explanatory power? Now that we could show that during this interval, Arundhati could actually be seen by everyone in the northern hemisphere of that time, walking ahead of Vasishta, we say, why is this Arundhati appears to be walking ahead of Vasishta? Now we go back, Karya Karana Bhav, and we start seeing the precision of the Earth's axis, the proper motions. We see why it is only a unique event that only happened once, and why if you go through the cycle of precision 26,000 years before, again it won't happen. Again, the Karya Karana Bhav, the causality, you can establish a causal explanation. That is that number 3. And verisimilitude or truth likeness score is what Aditya I told you. So if using this method framework, Nyaya Darshana or a scientific framework, you can take all the evidence and using the objective testing, beautifully, you can separate it into 2 categories. There can be more categories. Sometimes you cannot test it and whatnot because the explanation is not clear. But assuming explanation is clear, like the evidence explanation, you can separate it into 2 categories. One is the like 290 plus pieces of evidence that agree that correspondence with the fact of 5561 BC, and some 10 plus that do not correspond with the facts of 5561. That is the verisimilitude score. And it can be calculated, it can be estimated for any theory, any claim. Okay, and therefore you can compare that. On the other hand, now here, these are the good aspects of the epistemological from a subjective psychological point of view. what is important? And that's what makes us fearless, and that's what makes us humble. These are the Daivi Prakruti. Okay. Abhayam Sattva Samshuddhi Jnana Yoga Vyavasthiti, all the way to Amanita. We must always realize that no matter what we are doing, and no matter how close we are to the truth, even when we hit upon the truth, we may not necessarily know, we may not necessarily be ever anyone. That includes Einstein, Newton, Louis Pasteur, everyone. Never, we are never 100% confident, 100% sure that we have reached the truth. That is true in Adhyatma also. Okay, I mean, you want to know more about Krishna, but as you know more, the Krishna expands, the Paramatma expands, the nature expands for us. There is more to know. In fact, it just makes us realize how ignorant we are. How much ignorant we are, more and more we know about it. Isn't that fascinating? Then the empirical test, yes. So subjective, psychological, that people will say, oh, there should be some test. I mean, they are making a statement based on some test in their mind. They're saying, yeah, this one is better than this. Now, sometimes they cannot articulate. So the epistemological basis allows us to design empirical tests. Their ingenuity and originality and creativity is required. 15 years, I was not just sitting idle from 1995 to 2009. I was going after the astronomy catalogs. Like you asked me sometime about the astronomy catalogs. I'm going after astronomy catalogs. I'm looking at every mathematical formulation, mathematical calculation. That is a creativity that comes from your foundations. Like what can be known about this world? Okay. How can I create? How can I design ingenious experiments? That's that. And quickly, last two. And the explanatory power of the objective one, the subjective one is degree of testability. What I mean by that, I'll just give you one example and I'll finish the last one too. Degree of testability, degree of corroboration. Just to give an example. For example, say Mahabharata says that at the time of Mahabharata war, the planet Mars, okay, was going retrograde near Nakshatra, Chitra and Swati. Like Dhruvam Prajwalitam Ghoram Apasavya Pravartate Chitra Swatyantare Chaiva Dishtita Parushagraha. And by the time of the Mahabharata war, the actual war, the war first day, Vakranu Vakram Krutvam Cha Shravane Pavaka Prava Brahma Rashi Samavrutta Lohitango Vyavastita. And that same Mars had come near Brahma Rashi and Shravana Nakshatra together. They are together, Abhijit, Brahma Rashi, Shravana, they are next to each other by the first day of the war. Now, this particular observation, think of degree of testability and degree of corroboration. Okay, what we know is that can this situation happen multiple times? Yes, in principle, it will happen many, many times. But if it was happening at the time of Mahabharata war and the Mars was going retrograde near Chitra and Swati, which also tells you that Mars was not going retrograde near any of the other 24 plus nakshatras because it was going near this. So in that sense, it's a predictive, it's explanatory, it's prescriptive, it's a proscriptive. And we can see that, say, Mars going retrograde near particular nakshatra like Chitra Swati has a high degree of testability, has a high degree of corroboration. Then, for example, if a statement from Mahabharata that will say simply said, okay, and so the sun rose and it was all bright. So when sun rose and it was all bright, it tells us that it was the time of the morning. So far, so good. But how, for which day this description is applicable? In principle, practically every day. So in that case, that statement is important. It tells us it was the time of the morning, that sun rose and everything was shiny and bright or something like this, or sun was rising in the eastern direction. We know that it is a morning time, but the testability or a corroboration of it is not of a very high value. So testability is high. Yeah, it's a morning time because it's rising in the east. We know that. But the corroboration is not very high because it is going to happen every day. But Mars going retrograde is not going to happen every day, not going to happen every year. And so it kind of creates that specific unique thing. Okay, I want to stop on this and let me stop sharing. And back to you, Aditya-ji.
What a wonderful presentation, and with a different, you've shown these slides many times, but I love the way you put the Arundhati. And now It took me after so many sessions, I could notice Arundhati going ahead from the line. You've shown that. It's a swadhyay. Like many times you see the same thing, but one day it hits you. Okay, it's moving ahead.
Correct. That
And
is that is the idea of a japa. Sorry, I meant to wanted to interrupt you. Like when you are saying, say for example, Om Namah Shivaya or Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Purushottamaya or Hare Krishna 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 Hare Ram 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 Hare Hare. Someone will say, okay, I said it. I said it once. Why say it multiple times? It's the same thing. It's almost a metaphor also, japa and a tapa, for understanding everything. Now you are saying this, as you said very humbly. You have seen this many times, but it's slowly coming together, right? It just finally comes. Yeah, go ahead.
we must have read Gita 1,000 times. Every year we read it. Every month we complete it. I must have. It's an everyday process. You pick up one shloka and whole day think about it, and that's how you build. But one day it strikes you.
Yeah,
Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. This is a
correct.
direct order telling Arjun. Now dharma, meaning of dharma, means all kinds of mental conceptions, all types of mental uh, shackles. We
Yeah,
are all bound by the colonial shackles. So it's not a one day shloka reading and memorizing is enough. it's
correct.
it's a lifetime process. The same.
It, yeah.
you know,
Yeah, I
like
was going to add a couple of things. Sorry, I interrupted you twice today. See, the once you get into the field of action, that is when you start realizing things. For example, pravartana lakshana dosha. Only when you act, then then the defects will be seen, or the defects will occur. The dosha will occur. For example, if there is a fire, there is going to be a smoke. If there is a mirror, there will be a dust on surface of it. That doesn't mean we stop using fire and we stop using this. Just like you said, this verse sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam vraja aham tvam sarvapapebhyo mokshishyami ma shucha. The realization for me of the verse, another verse from the same chapter, 18th chapter, it only occurred, I would say last 10 years, but especially I would say last 5 6 years. So I published my first book 2011, and of course before people actually started reading it, it takes time. It took 5 years or so, I would say, before people started giving me response, I mean reviews in a big way. Now I get like hundreds of emails, but the first 5 years almost like nothing happened. The only when critics came and started critiquing or criticizing, rightfully or wrongfully, in a proper fashion or an improper fashion, logically or illogically, scientifically or unscientifically, it doesn't matter. That's when Krishna is saying, he's sharing this whole knowledge of Bhagavad-Gita, and through Vyasa, of course, to us, of this wisdom of Bhagavad-Gita. But in the end, after all of these and everywhere, he's saying, the one who says this knowledge to somebody, that person is very dear to me, and all that he's saying. But he's saying that, but he's also saying, idam te na tapaskaya na bhaktaya kadachana na chashru shushuve vacha na chamamyo bhyasuyati. This knowledge is not to be told to anyone. Okay, na tapaskaya, the person who has doesn't done any tapasya, the person who doesn't have any background knowledge to even comprehend this. Okay, na bhaktaya, the person who doesn't have a shraddha, doesn't have a reverence, doesn't have a conviction about this knowledge being useful. Okay, na chashushushue vacha, the person who is not interested in listening to this. Okay, na chashushushue vacha nachamamyo bhyasuyati, and the person who is envious of me. Okay, or envious of this knowledge, or envious of me. And I'm saying, well, he's saying that it should be said, but now he's saying, well, don't say it unless this. And I'm saying, well, if you put all these conditions, not many people are left, to whom you can say. And the realization of this verse came to me when I started seeing the critique and criticism. And do you know what, Aditya ji, most of the people will do? Most of these so-called critics, and there are some very good ones that I have received, and I'm very thankful to them in last 10 plus years. But most of them are utter crass. Okay, and you know what they do? They don't critique what I have written. They take what I have written, and either because they don't comprehend it, or sometimes they comprehend it but still want to create a jalpa vitanda. Therefore they will create a straw man. So they create something else, like something that I have not said. They'll say Nilesh is claiming this is the case and this is wrong. And I will agree with them and say, yeah, that's wrong, but I never said that. So that is one case. And second case, they will say something what I have done is wrong because they don't even comprehend it. But that is what that idam te natapaskaya nabhaktaya kadachana. Jisko somebody doesn't understand astronomy but wants to pretend that they understand astronomy. Okay, somebody doesn't understand the basic background of what is happening in Mahabharata text, the Vyasa's mindset, what is been done, and they will attach many motives to Vyasa. Just for example, say Shrikant Talagiriji is saying this is all in the mind of a Vyasa. This is attaching a motive. Vyasa has said it. Start with what he has said and see if you can show it or not. You may succeed, you may not succeed. Right?
The people should know when Vyasa entered the assembly hall. When Krishna entered the assembly hall, Vyasa stood up. But whenever Vyasa entered the assembly hall, Krishna also stood up. So the point which I am trying to say is that Vyasa Dev is one person only. Some people, they go to even one extent of rejecting Vyasa, and some, and I'm not saying anyone specific, but there are many people who claim that there are many Vyasa Dev also. I mean, Vyasa is a position, but there is one person who divided like jewels, all the different Veda, put them in written format for the benefit of people like us. Manda Sumanda Mateo, Manda Bhagyad Upadhuta. That's our qualification.
Yeah.
So rejecting Vyasadev is not the sign of being a good Sanatan Dharma follower. And because
you got frozen for a second there. Okay, yeah. And Aditya, can you repeat that verse? Shruti Smriti Puranadi.
Pancharatri ki vidhim vina ekanti ki prayer bhakti utpataya eva kalpate.
Okay, so Shruti Smriti Puranadi is a background knowledge.
Right.
Pancharatri is the method. The sadhana, right?
It's a
process. And if you don't do this, the ekantiki harir bhakti, it is to be done in ekanta also. See, Ramdas Swami, when he was studying for 24 plus years in total isolation.
So here the ekantiki means, it's a contextual word here. Ekantiki means by rejecting Shruti Smriti.
Oh, is it?
Yes. Here ekant means अकेले बैठ के और रिजेक्ट कर दिया श्रुति स्मृति को और पंचरात्रिका को भी.
Oh, they are Pancharatri ko bhi also removing karke. Okay. So this is like even a different context. Okay.
It's a different context. Ekantiki harer bhakti utpataya va kalpati. This shloka is quoted by Madhvacharya.
Okay.
This shloka is quoted by Ramanujacharya. This shloka is quoted by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and also quoted by Adi Sankaracharya. Adi Sankaracharya emphasized to his followers that you cannot reject. And finally it was quoted by Rupa Goswami.
Yeah, but they're saying reject those, right? The first line is to be rejected.
Yeah, people say that I will do my bhakti alone. It's a spiritual process. I don't have to follow Shruti, Smriti. It's God is within me. Like when they reject those things.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, so the message is you cannot reject it without the context of Shruti, Smriti, Puran, and Pancharatri ki. A bhakti that is done creates more havoc. Utpata. Right? Correct.
That's right.
That is what we are talking. So it cannot be so ekangi there in a ekantiki, they're saying in a sense by isolation, removing all these correct.
Alone.
Right. No, because I was taking some different meaning. Brahma Bindu Upanishad says in a different context, right?
Different concept.
Grantham Abhyasya Medavi Jnana Vidhyana Tatpara Palalami Vidhanyakti.
Bhagavad-Gita also, Krishna also says that a yogi sits in a solitary place, ekant. But that is different. Here ekantiki.
Yeah. So then I'm saying, so see, you need a background knowledge, you need a method. There is a method to madness, the Pancharatriki, right? That is how only should be done if you don't want to create nonsense.
That's right.
Okay. But that's what happens. Some person will just take one aspect and just run away with it, thinking that they have figured out something. It will only create utpat.
That's why I was saying that today, when you were showing the Arundhati Vashishta, it struck me, despite seeing this for more than 40 shows.
Yes.
And it struck me today after 41st. Manda Sumanda Mateo, that is a basic qualification Kali Yuga, that our intelligence is less, we cannot perceive things. That's the effect of Kali Yuga. And with all the wireless and all the camera waves and all the things going on,
it's getting affected too.
Yeah, all of us get affected with that. And the electric wiring going all over the place. You're living in an electromagnetic chamber in the house.
Yeah.
Surrounded by wires.
Right. And just on the, you said like a 40 plus shows or whatever those number of shows, I will add something to it. Again, given by, just quoted by somebody, it's a very simple thing. Again, the simple things are profound. That's what we
Right, right.
always experience, right?
That's a
So
eureka moment.
yeah, said by Vinoba, my inspiration. And he said, and that came from his own experience, because he actually, I don't know, people know, in Varda, he dug a whole well by himself when he was already 55, 60 plus.
Yes.
Okay. By very mathematical formulation, how much he has to do. So he has given in that context example, suppose there is a stone, big stone, and we are hitting with a hammer to break it. And we hit it, did not break. Another, and say 57 times we hit and it did not break. Then we hit 58 and it breaks, let's say. That doesn't mean the previous 57 hammering hits were wasteful. No, they all contributed to breaking it in the 58 times. So our 40 shows, possibly, all the shows, they were not a waste. They were leading us to this day, for Aditya ji today getting that aha moment of Arundhati Vasishta.
No, see, it is a like you mentioned Vardha. I lived in Vardha also. So the point I'm saying is the Shastra, if you more and more Manan, Chintan, Swadhyay, they
Yeah.
start speaking with you. My
Absolutely.
experience. And like the Bhagavad-Gita, the more you read, Bhagavad-Gita starts talking to you. Like the people always get confused on the Varna. I said 18th chapter, verse 41 to 47 you read.
Very good.
And every day you read. Every day.
Yeah.
And that's how you start. Let Bhagavad-Gita speak to you.
Correct.
Do Sandhi Vichhed, do this friend, write it down, write yourself for yourself or write for somebody else. But that's how you begin the process of Swadhyaya.
Yeah.
And then Manvana, Mad Bhakto, Madhyaji, Mam Namaskuru, Mame. These are the orders. And people tell me one thing, Nirejji, I'm reading Sanskrit so that I can start understanding. After you have crossed 35, nothing is going to get to your brain. It's a period thing. I would say learn Sanskrit from the Shastra.
Yeah.
So start reading Bhagavad Gita, Ramayana, Mahabharata, Gita Press, and gradually those books will speak with you. Gradually, and this is my experience with Bhagavad Puran. That is my experience with all of the literatures. And I just started reading Rig Veda, and I'll tell you, Nileshji, because I'm seeing Rig Veda from the eyes of Bhagavad Puran, I'm getting a totally different view of Bhagavad Rig Veda.
I would agree.
Like the Shastra Chakshu, we need to develop.
Yes.
So when you see Rig Veda from the point of view of Bhagavad Gita, because Bhagavad Gita is the latest book spoken by Bhagavan Shri Krishna directly. Yeah. Now, it is a totally different book for me. For me, I'm respecting Indra, I'm respecting other. When I read Manusmriti from the point of view of Gita, it's a totally different book.
Yes.
It's no longer the same.
Yeah. And so see, Rigveda is talking to you because you are approaching it saprayojana. Yeah. You have studied Bhagavad Puran for a long time. You have given lectures on it and whatnot. And you know that Bhagavad Puran is just like a Pancham Veda, it is a further expansion to understand Veda. You say, okay, so I am understanding Bhagavad Puran and it is saying, hey, this is to be used to understand Veda. Now let me go backward and see in what is the connection. Now you see the connection. Right. So my suggestion to many people say, so where should I start? I say Bhagavad Gita. But again, even starting with the Bhagavad Gita just for itself will not do. It has to be saprayojana. What is it that you want to get out of it? So when I went first time, when somebody has said everything is there in the Bhagavad Gita, whatever you want to know is in Bhagavad Gita, I was looking for a plane technology, aeroplane technology, So see, that did not come out as I thought. But because I'm saying, okay, where is it? I ended up going through everything in a very detailed fashion. This is I'm talking when I was a 10-year-old or something. I had written Eknati Bhagavad, the 11th skanda. So people need saprayojan. That is also another thing. Do you know many people think they just simply read Bhagavad Gita and therefore they are going to get some punya. It will be their papa nash and some magic will happen to them. That is how very juvenile approach many elders and grown-ups have, unfortunately.
No, that is true. Like one of the for the purpose of one of the talks, somebody asked me one question, and that was in 97. That where is vegetarianism emphasized in Bhagavad Gita? Now it's not in one place. It's There's one thing Krishna asked directly, Patram Pushpam Phalam Toyam Yome Bhakti
Right.
Prachati.
Right.
The second is Yagya Shishta Shina Santo Muchyante Sarvakilbishe. Ye
Mm.
Pachanti Atma Karanat. That
Mm.
is in chapter 3. And the third one is that go ahead, you're saying
No, no,
something.
you go ahead first. Then I will say it.
Yeah, you're
You want
saying,
me to say?
yeah,
No, I don't know if that is what you had in mind, but it's Ayush Sattva Balarogya Sukha Priti
that's right.
Vivardhana
That's
Rasya
right.
Snigdha Stira Arudhya Ahara Satvika Priya.
So in Bhagavad Gita, Krishna doesn't tell you what you should eat or what you should not.
Huh.
Krishna tells you this is the food of the sattvic people, this is the
Correct.
food of the rajasic people, this is the
Yes.
tamasic. See, Krishna has put the, you call it, scholarly excellence in the place. So he leaves the decision to you.
Yes.
You have to decide whether you want to be tamasic, you are tamasic, or you're
Yeah.
rajasic, or but Krishna is not branding you anything.
Correct.
You know?
He's showing the Karya Karana Bhav. If you eat this will happen.
Correct.
If you eat this, right, this will happen. Katavamla Lavanatyushna Tikshna Ruksha Vidahina
Correct.
Ahara Rajasashaiva Dukkha Shoka Maya Prada. You eat Kata Amla Lavana Tyushna Tikshna, you will get Dukkha and Shoka.
Correct.
So if somebody is saying, please, I want some Dukkha and Shoka, well, go for it.
So if you look for, like, somebody asked me, where is Bhagavad Gita says don't eat chai and coffee? I said, see, listen to me. Bhagavad Gita is way beyond that. It is telling you what food can give you pain.
Yeah.
And what food can make you crazy. Alasya, mother.
Correct. Correct.
And so you decide what you want to have. Freedom is ultimately yours.
Yes.
After speaking the whole Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjun,
yes.
Jo marji hai karo abhi.
Also, also it's an open framework.
Correct.
Because see, some of the ingredients that are available in India may not be available in America. Right? So, but he's saying, hey, for your location, find out those ingredients which will give you Sukha Priti Vivardhana or Dukkha Shoka, right? It is like that. Therefore, say if you go Vibhuti Yoga, like Sthavaranam Himalaya, okay? So like among the stable things, it's a Himalaya, my Vibhuti. Now the person living in Denver does not have to go to mountains. I mean, does not have to go to Himalaya. He can go to Rocky Mountains and meditate on it and think of Krishna. That is the beauty, you know. Right. So it's a very general message too.
So thank you all the people who joined, and I did cover all the areas that I had for this show. There's unlimited things to talk about, and but time is a limit, you know, samay, kal. So thank you so much for joining, and Nilesh ji, as usual, a wonderful talk. And
thank you, Aditya ji.
Namaste. Thank you.
Namaste.